Robert,
Yeah,
good afternoon. Or
yeah, same to you. Glad to be here, I think.
well, we're so pleased to have you today, and honored. I must say it's a very special event for
Uh,
us.
uh,
Um,
Thank you. I'm honored to be asked. A little apprehensive about what I understand to be the last question, which is what we're all to do about this situation. But we'll see.
I just want to let the students know we're conducting this talk by audio because Robert wants to or has a more, how would you put it?
You're trying to be polite about it, Gregory. That I'm trying to avoid saying I'm a Luddite, but you can go ahead.
It's your preference to do this by audio, and of course we're so pleased to have you. And
Thank you.
so as we discussed, I'm going to ask you a series of general, sort of open-ended questions, and you could sort of answer as you wish or not. You ready to begin?
Yeah, sure.
First question is, what was your first aesthetic awakening?
It's a little hard to answer because, as far as I'm aware, the awakening was gradual. My parents were both very bright. They were both college teachers involved in all kinds of important things, but neither knew really anything about the visual arts and not much about literature. But as a family, we sang a lot, curiously. And I think music together with nature, the two of them were probably my first experience of beauty and of beauty's power. Subsequently, when I got to high school, my sister, with whom I was very close, and I discovered the Denver Art Museum, which at that time was free. And we took to frequently going down and spending our Saturday afternoons in the museum. And it was, for me, transformative. I don't think I would have thought for a moment about being in the visual arts had it not been for high school Saturdays in the museum. But if your question is more specific, in photography, I think my first attention to photographs was with a book my sister gave me, The Family of Man. I didn't think about being a photographer, but I saw a record of humanity that stayed with me lifelong. And ultimately, I think in photography, my awakening experience, curiously, was, as it is with many, was Ansel Adams' picture Moonrise Hernandez. And that was the first print I ever bought for $40. And I still, to this day, think it is an amazing picture. Other things that got me looking more attentively at the world were architecture. I took a course in high school in architecture drawing. In literature later on, Joyce's Portrait and Ulysses. In film, curiously, in high school again, I had a teacher who said, you've got to go across town and see a movie by Kazan called Viva Zapata. And although it seems to me now a rather spotty production, it still has passages that I admire and that I reference sometimes.
Who were your early influences in terms of photography when you were coming of age, photographers specifically?
They were the ones I suppose you would expect. Ansel Adams and Weston were big ones, somewhat interested in Strand, all that generation for 2 or mattered quite a bit.
Do you feel that your work is in any way autobiographical?
I think um, all art is autobiographical. I don't know where else you draw from, really, except your own experience. Art is composed of other elements, but in my case, for example, some of the books I've done, I think, are evidence of my love for my wife, Kirsten. They're also evidence of my commitment to the natural world and my dismay at its damaging. And other things I've done testify to my fear of nuclear weapons. We used to live just south of a nuclear weapons plant. And my fear of capitalism, for example, and overpopulation. They testify to a belief then that life points beyond itself. Paul Tillich said, as you perhaps know, that everything we say about God is metaphor. That became a concern of mine for a long time until I discovered that. So, but the artwork that was important to me, I think, is a reflection of my life, and what I've tried to do is a reflection of my life.
How do you feel that your photographs have shaped our understanding of the American landscape? It might be a difficult question for you to answer.
well, if my photography has shaped anybody's understanding of the American landscape, it's a tiny minority.
I'm included in that minority, I would say, and probably many.
Well, thank you. The truth is, I think that art really helps us all just recognize what we already know, and so, which isn't to say that art is unimportant, but I'm not sure if I've really changed anybody. I think art doesn't help you discover new things. I think it helps you rediscover old things, and I suspect that's what's happening.
Do you believe in photographic truth or neutrality?
If by photographic truth or neutrality you mean absolute objectivity, I suppose even scientific photography is, strictly speaking, impossible. But I guess my answer to that is, who cares? This is a kind of gloom that only boulevard intellectuals find nourishing, I think. In the world in which you and I live, most of us have to make our way. I believe still photography, if a person is reasonably honest, has a fair shot at describing fact. How does a street look in Aleppo, for example? But in common with many other kinds of art, it seems to me art can also take liberties with factual truth in order to point to more general and sometimes life-sustaining truths. It can sort out and simplify facts to suggest truths that are on another level. For example, there were a lot more facts out there next to that pea field that Dorothea Lange stopped at, besides the migrant mother, but she simplified the facts of that situation to something deeper. art, it seems to me, is it often affirms a clearer shape and meaning in life than common experience appears to support. Art is a visionary intuition in favor of significance and promise, it seems to me. It depends somewhat on touching bases with hard facts, so you don't think artists ignore them, but it's after something beyond just facts. Art is to me, it seems to be a sorting out of life's facts in order to frame, frankly, our most precious and life-sustaining understandings. You can't prove that art is true in that sense, but I don't think you can live without it either.
Wow. What is the least favorite part of the artistic process for you? Part you like the least?
Well, oh boy. I think, to be honest, it's having anything to do with setting a price on one's own work. It just seems to me to be a complete disconnect. You set out to make pictures and you take some hard knocks in order to do so, all in order to honor something beyond price. And how in goodness name are you supposed to turn around and put a price tag on it, which to go to the other side of this, which is why I'm extremely grateful to honest and effective dealers. For me, Jeff Frankel and Matthew Marks and Thomas Sander have helped us in ways that are vital, just to take some of the fright out of life. They've provided an income, and bless them for it, because every time I go down to the gallery, which isn't often, but I'm there about 2 hours, and I think, my God, I could never anymore do this than fly. There are aspects to the job that I just totally beyond me. The other least favorite thing, as long as we're talking about it, actually is trying to talk about and explain my own work. Trying to explain what you've done has the unpleasant, embarrassing implication that you haven't done it effectively. And successful art is really, by definition, I think, it's complete, it's whole, it's clear, and it's true. Of course, there are people like my parents who needed some grounding in it to know what to look for. But explaining your own work is really tough, I think.
Was there a movie or artwork that changed your life?
Oh boy, many things. The list would be very long. Rembrandt's etchings continue to do that for me. Hopper's paintings do that. Ozu's films do that. It'd be a really long list. I don't go to church, but I do study art every day, and a lot of my life is sustained by that.
So, taken as a whole, another difficult question, what do you see as the central themes and preoccupations in your work? You can sort of think retrospectively at all the different series and extraordinary bodies of pictures you've made over the years.
Boy, um, I know that if I step back far enough, what I'm trying to do is to encourage respect and caring and gratitude for what we were all given. In other words, to try to help both myself and others to be worthy of walking out the door on an average day. I'm obviously distressed at the moment to be an American, to realize what we've done to harm the creation, and so a lot of my work is both trying to point out what's indestructible, and to figure out how we might stop doing the damage we're doing. So I think that runs through the center of it. But the question might be too big, Greg. I think it's beyond me to answer.
I think the pictures do answer that question.
Thank you.
Do you ever think about your audience? Who's your imagined audience when you're either making pictures or after you finish the body of work? Or
when I'm making them, I don't think about anything except what's out in front of me. So I don't have any thoughts about where they're going. It's taking pictures is utterly you're utterly awake to the world, and that's it. It's to be full on, participatory, focused. Sometimes when I hear people talk about meditation, I've never known quite what they mean, but I think sometimes when I hear them speak about meditation, I think, oh, that's kind of like photography. So when I take them, I'm not thinking about anybody but the stuff out front of the camera. When I get back and I make prints, and only I and maybe Sherston have seen them, sometimes when I try to understand whether I've succeeded or not, I will try to imagine standing there with this pile of prints next to a photographer that I know and respect, and go through those pictures and sense what it would be like to stand with that person. Would I have to try to make excuses? Would it be uncomfortable? Would I have to try to explain them? And if so, I know that I'm in trouble. So in that sense, that's my first audience. It's an imagined audience. The ultimate audience, though, is really any thoughtful person who might pick up a book or walk through a museum. And when I say that, of course, it's presumptuous because it's probably not within the realm of possibility, but I do, like I think any photographer, dream still of someday reaching a general audience.
Mm-hmm.
Probably isn't going to happen, but that's what I do have in the back of my mind.
How has success affected your work?
Oh boy, it's of course it's comic because I don't if I'm successful, boy, it's a surprise to me in a way. But some things are good, some things are not good. If we define success as financial stability, it's certainly less frightening to be able to sell some pictures, especially as you get old and you face the possibility of possibly needing help or care. Another good thing about success, to the extent that I've experienced a little bit of it, is it reduces the time you have to spend cultivating publishers and galleries and museums. They tend to come to you, which leaves you freer to do what you're skilled at, which is to make the pictures in the first place. I have to say that there are some disappointments. And one of the aspects that I particularly regret here in my 80s, I'm really sad now that sometimes I cannot answer the mail anymore. I've tried to do it all my life, and I wish I could continue to do it because many of the letters are extremely kind and very thoughtful and encouraging. But I've got some diminishing eyesight and certainly diminishing energy, and it's no longer always possible. So the answer to success insofar as what it might in some tiny way apply to me is it's a blessing in practical ways. It also has some downsides.
What have you learned through failure?
There's so much of it, I ought to have learned more. No, every contact sheet, or almost every contact sheet, offers lessons through failure. There it is, proof positive. You saw something and almost got it, but didn't quite get it. And the same applies even to books occasionally. The whole process has gone through to a bound book, and slowly you see ways that you could have done it better. Yale helped me to take another run at some things, and I think we did better. And Gerhard Steidl has done the same thing, and I'm appreciative to both Yale and Steidl for allowing me to do that. Steidl, for example, just did a new and much bigger, just dimensionally bigger, but also re-edited and expanded version of From the Missouri West. Yeah. And it's really just way better than the original version. So failure sometimes, if you can stand it, it helps. You can get better.
I'm interested in your thoughts about the way photographs are now mostly disseminated and seen through screens rather than physical prints.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add, really. There's some of the beauty, obviously, in a photographic print is lost when the image is transferred to screen. And also lost is a sense, one kind of sense of greater permanence. Just to have the object is somehow reassuring to me. And also the opportunity to see it on the wall at times when you haven't asked to have it, but it's just there and you pass it by. It helps you come to know the picture better. The gain, of course, with having the picture on the screen is that more people can see more pictures. Though again, the pictures are less worth seeing. The compromise that I've been permitted sometimes is in the form of high-quality photographic books. Though there too, they reach only a small audience and they're expensive. So I don't know what the solution is, really.
I have one final question, and then if there's time for a few questions from the students. The last question is perhaps the most pressing, given the moment we're in, but what advice would you give the students in this moment of peril?
It's that question which you and Lisa Carezzi warned me of that almost made me not do this interview. So I shrink from giving advice. Everybody's life is different, their backgrounds, their gifts, their resources, their hopes. And not only that, but I'm just as stunned and baffled by current events as you are. Who would have, there isn't a day, isn't an hour practically goes by, but what I'm just not just terrified, frankly, by the fact that our president is a sociopath. But let me try to stumble through some thoughts on this. First off, if you don't become an artist, if you don't become a photographer, it's okay. It's all right. You can do other very worthwhile work. And I have known, and you probably have known, fine people in other professions, and I'm totally thankful that they're part of my life and the wider world. Having said that, though, speaking from my own personal experience, if you don't become an artist, you might have missed a particularly interesting and satisfying path. And insofar as you might have already sensed how rich that experience might be, you might, I'm not saying you will, but you might wonder lifelong if you should have taken bigger risks in order to become a photographer, an artist. My old Shakespeare teacher, William Bain, used to say, and it's true, life is not a dress rehearsal. You just get one shot at it. The other day when my wife and I were talking about this question over the breakfast table, she pointed out to me that in some ways, your predicament as art students now has some resemblance to how we survived in earlier years by me having trained in a completely other and more or less financially dependable profession. I went to graduate school, became an college English teacher for a while. So for a while we survived. I was photographing partly, and partly I was teaching, working very, very hard at teaching. English teaching is a terrible burden. I was writing. I was correcting 60 papers a week minimum with 11 contact hours, class contact hours. So I was working up until 1 and 2 o'clock at night over and over again. But I also photographed. And when that got pushed back, my wife went to graduate school in library science. And so we ended up for quite a number of years with me having a roller coaster income. One year, I remember when Reagan came in, we had an income. I had an income of $2,000 and some dollars, but my wife had an income of probably 4 or 5 times that, more modest than one might hope, but a steady income. So between the two of us, we managed to do it, and it depended in part on the fact that I had two professions to follow, and it occurred to her and occurred to me that maybe there's something that could be pulled out of that for you. As I'm sure you know, as art students, there have been many, many artists who survived by practicing, sometimes at the same time, 2 professions. Chekhov and William Carlos Williams, for example, were doctors and writers. Mm-hmm. Eugene Meatyard was an ophthalmologist and a photographer. The question is, how to be a visionary and how to be practical at the same time, and it demands, unfortunately, sometimes some very extreme sacrifices. Not always, but sometimes. For example, the question of whether to have children is unavoidable. Cyril Connolly, the writer, wrote famously at one point, quoting him, "Art has no greater enemy than the pram in the hallway." And for many, I've observed that to be true. It's not always true. It helps if you have a lot of money, but money doesn't always cure everything. Yes, there are instances of great artists, great curators who have been strong family people. Think of Pissarro, the painter, for example, but they're in a minority. To have children is to raise the risk greatly. I think what I'm trying to say is that art is not a career that is plausible for most people. It is, however, a calling. Stieglitz said at one point that with respect to being an artist, quoting him, "Having to, that is the only wanting I recognize. Having to, that is the only wanting I recognize." So it's to embark on a very risky journey, but with very real rewards. And sometimes when I've tried to talk to somebody about this, I remember a wonderful blessing by the Spanish writer Miguel de Unamuno, who was talking about the fictional figure Don Quixote and Unamuno's vision of life, which was tragic. But Unamuno pronounced this blessing. He said, "May God deny you peace, but give you glory." And to some extent, it seems to me that's a blessing for artists. May God deny you peace, but give you glory. So I don't know if any of that's helped, but it's a tough one.
Wow. Well, I mean, I have no idea where we could possibly go from there. It was the most beautiful answer to that question. And I just want to thank you so deeply from the bottom of my heart for all your words of wisdom.
Oh,
and
thank you.
There are 600 faces that all are hanging on every one of your words. So it's certainly profound.
I wish I was more confident that I was a help, but it's sort of interesting to me that photography, it doesn't apply to you, Gregory, much, but most photographers work more or less alone.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many times when one feels very lonely as a photographer, I think. But the truth is, and you find this the longer you're in the profession, that there is really a community. And I have to say, when I quit teaching, I was surprised by, this sounds terrible, but how much, on average, how much better, how much nicer, frankly, the community of artists was than the academic community, which tends to get hung up on small details of parking places and titles and the rest of it. But perhaps because there's often so little in the way of practical riches to come from art, there's a lot of friendship that is really one of the benefits of being an artist.
Well, on that note, Robert, I thank you, and all the students thank you. And I also want to wish you a happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm up at the age where you try not to think about that, but thank you for the good wishes anyway.
And thank you for all the great words of wisdom and really profound thoughts on the nature of life and art.
So, is that it?
I think that's it. I think we're done. I think that's I think couldn't be more perfect.
Good. Thank you. Take care. Be well.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and again, profound thanks.